Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Molly Birch. I am joined today by Caden Minus. And gun laws in the state of Michigan are tightening today. That's what we're discussing today. After these laws were passed by the Democratic-led legislature, they were signed by Governor Gretchen Whitmer to combat gun violence in the state. Caden worked yesterday and today putting together two stories on these laws, and we're going to start by taking a look at the story that he put together yesterday.
If you are considering buying a firearm at a gun show, a new law signed last April will add more steps to that process. Mainly, a background check and a license to purchase will now be required for all firearms, including rifles and shotguns, during private sales like gun shows. A concealed pistol license can take the place of the license to purchase. But Negaunee Rod and Gun Club board member Robin Turner says there's still confusion about private transactions between individual sellers at their own homes.
I have heard several different theories about what is the appropriate course of action for an individual wanting to sell one of his personal firearms to somebody else. Now, most cases, appears that it's going to have to go through an FFL license holder.
The Michigan State Police Firearms Records Unit says there are extra steps if a buyer does not have a CPL and wants to purchase from a private seller. The buyer must now go through a background check and get a license to purchase from a licensing authority. The seller must complete a license to purchase and a firearms sales record, then provide a copy to the purchaser. If the buyer has a CPL, the license to purchase is not required. Unless the firearm is a pistol, then a copy of the license and a sale record must be submitted by the seller to their police department or sheriff's office within 10 days. With these new laws, federal firearms license holders will still need to conduct background checks for all buyers unless a license to purchase has been provided. In addition, the seller must still complete the license to purchase and firearms sales record with the firearms information and provide a copy to the purchaser. This law will put new responsibilities on the seller. If the firearm is a pistol, a copy of the license and the sale record must be submitted by the seller to their police department or sheriff's office within 10 days. Marquette County Undersheriff Daniel Willey expects to see more people stopping by the sheriff's office to get a license to purchase. He says this process is nothing new.
I think it's going to be manageable. I don't think it's going to be a problem. You know, for the state of Michigan, we've had the process for a long time before they changed some of the laws where you had to come in and get the permit to purchase anyway. So we're used to doing that type of thing.
Willie says if you're not sure what to do, the sheriff's office is available.
The people that work in the front office deal with this all of the time, and we will find the answer out for you, how you can legally obtain the gun and get it put in your name.
So, Caden, it sounds like there are new steps in the gun buying process. Can you walk us through those for a bit?
Yeah, mainly, especially for like private sales, like gun shows or kind of between person and a person, you need to go to a licensing authority like your police department or sheriff's office and get a background check. And that does mean you're going to have to be a little bit more like planning. If you do want to purchase a firearm, you do have to be a little bit like thinking ahead.
Mm-hmm. And these background checks, of course, were always a thing when you were buying a gun, say, in a store.
Yeah.
But now it's when you go to a gun show or you're buying guns privately that they need to be had as well, yes?
Exactly, yeah. And especially, you also had to get a permit to purchase when you were purchasing handguns from private sales. And so, yeah, it's adding basically rifles and shotguns to kind of like that list of firearms where you have to get a background check in a private sale.
Mm-hmm. And then, so what are the regulations for personal sales between private individuals in their own homes? That's another question with this new regulation.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very much just the same thing where you do have to get that license to purchase from your licensing authority. The seller, the person giving it to you, has to complete that firearm sales record and that license to purchase. And if the firearm happens to be a handgun, they have to go turn it into your local sheriff's office within 10 days, so then the sheriff has that handgun file as well.
Absolutely. So these changes, what does it mean for gun buyers in the immediate? What do they need to be focusing on?
Basically, like I said before, is very much just planning ahead. Like, if you want to go to a gun show or if you have a friend that is looking to sell you a firearm, make sure you know when your sheriff's office is open, make sure you know like what's going on, and so then that way you can go in, like get that license to purchase, because when you get that license to purchase, it's eligible for 30 days. So if you know there's a gun show maybe like 2 weeks into the month, maybe go get your license to purchase at the beginning of the month, and then you're all set to go for that gun show when it happens. So.
Absolutely. So if any of you have any questions while we're discussing, feel free to answer or shoot a comment in the chat when you feel like it. If you have a question, we'll keep an eye on it and we'll answer those questions as we see them. But the other side of this story, Caden, is the new extreme risk protection orders that are also going into effect today. And you did another story today on those. Let's take a look at that story really quickly.
Michigan's new extreme risk protection orders, or red flag laws, went into effect today. Governor Whitmer signed the legislation into law last May. ERPOs can be filed by a former or current spouse, a roommate, a family member, a law enforcement officer, or a healthcare provider. According to the Michigan State Police Firearms Records Unit, these orders are filed if there is a reasonable belief a person poses a risk to themselves or others. Marquette County Chief Probate and Circuit Court Judge Cheryl Hill provides an example.
Some people with mental illness, they become paranoid, and it's not their fault, it is the illness. But to protect themselves, or they think somebody is after them, they might be carrying a gun, and then maybe have brandished a gun or pointed it at someone or said to someone, I'm going to kill you. I think that's the type of situation we are talking about.
Hill says then, if a court deems it necessary, that a person will be served with a court order which becomes effective immediately. Those who receive an extreme risk protection order may have to surrender their firearms within 24 hours depending on the determined risk. The person will have to surrender their concealed pistol license and any licenses to purchase. For this reason, 906 concealed carry owner Avery Smith is concerned these kinds of orders may be abused. He wants to make sure due process will be followed.
Is every step of the law going to be followed before that extreme risk order or red flag law is going to be issued, and there's a knock on somebody's door and those guns are taken?
Smith says he has heard concerns that someone will be flagged without reason.
Somebody's going to be illegitimately flagged, and now they're going to lose all their firearms until that process goes through to show that, no, this person wasn't a danger to themselves or others.
But Judge Hill says the courts look at multiple factors when it comes to filing an ERPO.
Does the respondent means the person who you want the order against, have a history of use, attempted use, threatened use of physical force against the individual? Is there any evidence of a serious mental illness or serious emotional disturbance? Has the respondent ever had an order before or a PPO before? Do they have any criminal charges pending against them?
All right. So, Caden, what is an extreme risk protection order? Let's just go over that real quick.
So an extreme risk protection order, kind of as we heard, is an order that can be filed against an individual that is deemed a risk to themselves or others, and that gives law enforcement the authority to go in and take the firearms out of their homes for a year. So.
Mm-hmm. So who can submit these ERPOs, as they're said in short?
Yeah, absolutely. So according to the Michigan State Police Firearms Records Unit, it has to be people that are close to you. So that is like a former or current spouse, like as I mentioned before, a family member, a roommate, a co-parent, a law enforcement officer, a healthcare provider, someone that either has authority or would know you. It can't, like, there was a lot of concern when I was talking to people about these laws that it could be like a disgruntled neighbor or like someone you ran into was like, oh, like, I don't want this person to have guns. Like, I'm just a random dude, and that could file a ERPO against you. But that's not the case. It has to be someone that knows you or has some form of authority.
Mm-hmm. So then who can submit, why can these be submitted at the end of the day?
So a lot of it is based off of a concern that this person will injure themselves with a firearm or injure others with a firearm. And that could be like if you're like a family member and this person might be thoughts of self-harm, thoughts of hurting others. Maybe they have a mental illness where they're like seeing things or they're paranoid, and like Judge Hill mentioned, it's not their fault, it is the mental illness, but maybe they're paranoid and they're trying to protect themselves, so they get a gun, and then maybe they brandished it, carried it, or said someone like in their mental state saying like, I'm going to kill you. And that's just more so that person doesn't, like, in that manic state, go attack someone or attack themselves.
Mm-hmm. So it's more of a extra measure for personal safety.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So what happens when someone is served an ERPO?
So that does become effective immediately. I actually do have my notes here. They do have, so depending on the risk, they may have 24 hours to surrender their firearms, or they may have to call law enforcement immediately to go in and seize those firearms. And and those are in place for a year unless it's like renewed or until it expires, and then that person can get their firearms back.
And these orders can also be contested. That's correct, right?
Yes, I spoke to Judge Hill, and it's if you believe that you were falsely like a false ERPO was filed against you, you can go into the courts and say this was like a false file against me, and then you can have your day in court and make sure like you're being properly represented. And if the courts deem it like false, like it was a false filing, then it's expunged. But if it turns out like no, you do have these problems, you will have to continue with that ERPO and that confiscation of your firearms.
And one of the big concerns with this new law is the potential for it to be abused. What does the court consider when dealing with these ERPO cases?
Right, and so it's like I said before, where it's like it's not just one thing, where it's like just one-off situation where like it may be in like an exasperated moment said I'm going to hurt myself or I'm going to hurt someone. It's either like it's a combination of things like mental illness, like previous violent convictions, previous violent encounters. She mentioned, sorry, I'm going to have my notes up here. Has the person in her quote towards the end of the story, does the respondent means a person who you want the order against, have a history of use, attempted use, threatened use of physical force against the person that filed the complaint? Is there any evidence of serious mental illness or serious emotional disturbance? Has the respondent ever had an ERPO or even a personal protection order before, or do they have any pending criminal charges? And it's a combination of things. Like it's not just like one thing, one and done, and then you lose your gun. So.
All right. Thank you so much for joining me today, Caden, and for answering the questions. If any of you have any further questions, feel free to comment, and Caden and I will keep an eye on the comments in the meantime. We'll try to answer you if you have any burning questions last minute. Thank you all again for joining us live at the TV6 Digital Desk. Have a great rest of your evening.